So my name is Benjamin O. Good evening, good afternoon. Um, Hello, everyone. And my pronouns are he, him, they, them. So on behalf of Eco Voices Australia, I would like to acknowledge the enduring sovereignty of First Nations peoples, the Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and South Sea Islanders people, their lands, seas, knowledge, kinship systems, and community wisdom. And we bear witness to their diversity, their wisdom, and their resilience. And we honor their elders, past, those present, and those perhaps present amongst us and emerging. This was, and always will be Aboriginal land. So this evening, you are part of Eco Voices' seasonal conversations. This is the second in our series for this season. We had um, Reverend Dr. Father James Ellison with us previously. And this evening, we are joined by a wonderful, pioneering theologian and ministry person that will be with us. But before that, let me introduce a bit about Eco Voices. So Eco Voices is an ecumenical movement of Christians coming together from our various organizations, churches, wherever we are. We are heeding to the voice of Jesus to make spaces of flourishing. And I suppose this conversation, it's part of the response to what Jesus have asked of us, that we may be one, as they, the Trinity, are one. So that's pretty much what seasonal conversations it's about. It's about having nourishing conversations for our queer Christian flourishing. Actually, more than that, for our queer human flourishing. So in the lead up to Trans Awareness Week and Trans Day of Remembrance, we are lucky this evening to have this conversation with the Reverend Dr. Christina Beardsley. And I will now hand over to my wonderful co-chair, the Reverend Dr. Josephine Ingpin, to help us with the next part of this conversation.
Thank you, Ben, very much. It's a delight to see everyone here, and we're on a wonderful journey, I think. And for me, as someone who, one of the things when you come out in and in Australian connection with different people is connecting with people of all kinds of different backgrounds. All sorts of people write to me and connect with me. But the most exciting thing for me is the way in which we've now got various generations of people, and that'll be reflected in our panel, and trans and other gender diverse people emerging in all kinds of different traditions. So it's particularly important, I think, that we can do this on a ecumenical basis, and we can draw on this experience. But we're going to begin with prayer, and so I've asked three people to contribute, and the first person I'm actually going to hopefully play a sound file, because Clara was going to join us and has been unable to, and she'll explain a little bit about that. But she's been someone who's sort of accompanied my journey, and she's one of the people from Queensland, because that's one of the aspects of Australia, as we know, is that we're often divided by distance. But this facility enables us to speak. And Clara is, as she will say, a lawyer and a good resource. And I think that's what I hope Eco Voices can do, put us in touch with people who can offer particular gifts. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Clara, and then Abner, who's a trans man who's from South Sydney Uniting Church, will offer a prayer. And then it's a huge delight to have Mikali, who's going to sing for us live one of a song that they have composed, and they will explain something about that, I think, as we go along. Isn't that right, Mikali? Wherever you are. So over to Clara to begin a reading from the Psalms.
I'm Clara Duncan. I'm trans, a lawyer, and a parent. Regrettably, I cannot be with you at this time, as it is my daughter's birthday, and I need to attend Transcend Australia's strategy workshop. I support trans and non-binary flourishing in faith and acknowledge the excellent work of Penny and Joe in their pastoral care for Milton Anglican. I've been asked to read from Psalm 139:11 through to 16. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and night wraps itself around me, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as the day, for darkness is as light to you. For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works that I know very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Your eyes beheld my unformed substance. In your book were written all the days that were formed for me, when none of them as yet existed.
Over to Abner.
Yes. Kaleidoscopic God, beyond gender and embodied in all. Thank you for your love and your assurance that we have been faithfully and wonderfully made. Grant us strength and joy in being the people whom you have created and called us to be. Give us patience and bring persistence in the faith of struggle and loving persistence in the faith of struggle and adversity, and help us always to live fully as blessed images of you. Amen.
Hi everyone, as Joe said earlier, my name's Makali, my pronouns are they, them, and I'm joining from Gadigal, Wongal country. This song is about the slow work of love in transforming the world, and the way that our journeys and our lives get to be part of that story. Show me that storyline that ties it all together, like a poet keeping time. Show me the rhythm running through that water and that wine. Little things you're making sacred in the story that you weave. All our love and laboring is crafting something beautiful. Like a river rolls downhill, love is always running on, canyon carving a new world, slowly shaping a new earth. When that story seems to still, that old river it still turns, every hand held, every tear, surely shaping a new world. Show me the seasons turn, that play that keeps unfurling, every seed and every birth, held within that story's arc. How our bodies from that earth. From dust all this unfolding, when it seems your work has stopped, you remind us where we're from, love that will never dry up. Like a river rolls downhill, love is always running on, canyon carving a new world, slowly shaping a new earth. When that story seems to still, that old river it still turns, every protest every year, surely shaping a new world. You are making a new world, you are making a new world. You are making a new world, you are making a new world. Oh, you are making a new world, you are making a new world. Oh, you are making a new world, you are making a new world. Like a river rolls downhill, love is always running on, canyon carving a new world, slowly shaping a new earth. When that story seems to still, won't you put us to your work, that our eyes would see on the earth, surely shaping a new world. Like a river rolls downhill, love is always running on, canyon carving a new world, slowly shaping a new earth. When that story seems to still, won't you put us to your work, that our eyes would see on the earth, surely shaping a new world.
It's beautiful. Thank you, Macaulay. Thank you, Macaulay. Thank you, Macaulay, for that beautiful, beautiful song. Um, it really sets the tone actually for this evening. Um, just before I just thought that this is a bit that maybe might be helpful as part of our housekeeping. Um, if we are able to just try to keep this place a safe place, and I know that we will all do that. The idea is that we keep this place a welcoming and supportive, safe environment for LGBTIQA plus persons and our family and our loved ones, free from silencing and name calling and bullying, discrimination. And so this is the space that we're trying to create. And the other thing that I'm hoping, just as a housekeeping, as you have questions along the way, or reflections that you might have, if you could message me directly, and so that I could collate them and I might present it to our panel as we go along. So I might hand it over again back to my co-chair of Eco Voices, Joe.
Thank you very much, Ben. So there's three sections really, and first, and most importantly, we're to hear from Christina Beardsley, who's going to speak in a minute. I'll introduce her. And then we have a panel of four people from here in Australia who will make a response and hopefully open up a bit of a conversation. And then we hope that we can deal with some questions and that can come from others as well. And then we will conclude with a final prayer and I hope a blessing from Tina. So it's first and foremost, it's my huge pleasure personally and in other ways to welcome Reverend Dr. Christina Beardsley, who's joining us from London this evening in our time, but in the morning in London. And Christina Beardsley is one of the pioneer transgender priests in the Church of England, but more than that, has done some amazing work and a whole range of different levels. She's amongst other things is a historian, has written on Victorian religion, but also is a little bit of a historian, I think would be fair to say, Tina, but of the story of queer people and the journey that has been made, particularly in England, but also elsewhere, particularly from a faith point of view. And Tina has served as a health care chaplain for many years, including as head of multi-faith chaplaincy at the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital in London, but was also helped to found the Clare Project in Brighton in Sussex, which is a transgender support body which continues to flourish, I think I'm right to say, Tina, and offer tremendous support for people, but is also a member of the Sibyls, which is part of my journey, which is a support group primarily in England for trans and other gender diverse people. Tina is, there's so much I could say about this, but Tina continues to work for the full inclusion of LGBTIQA people in the Church of England. I think I'm right in saying that, Tina, even though Tina was a member of the core group of the coordinating group for the Church of England's Bishop's teaching document on human identity, sexuality and marriage called Living in Love and Faith, which is quite a major thing within the Anglican communion, but left that body, and that's a bit of a story which we could come back to perhaps. But Tina's been supporting and working with transgender people throughout and other queer people throughout Europe and throughout the Anglican communion, and enabling steps that have been taking forward. She's the author of several books and articles on faith and gender variance. And if you're not aware of them, do look these up. These include This Is My Body, Hearing the Theology of Transgender Christians, which was co-edited with Michelle O'Brien, and co-author with Chris Dowd of Trans Faith, a Transgender Pastoral Resource, and most latterly, Trans-Affirming Churches, How to Celebrate Gender Variant People and Their Loved Ones. And really, if you're aware of Tina, really there's no excuse, I think, Tina, for churches not to take these things on, is there really? Anyway, over to you. Such a delight. I wouldn't be where I am today. I wouldn't have survived coming out in the Australian church without your guidance, Tina. So personally as well, you're a great blessing to us and joining us today.
Well, wonderful to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Ben, you are going to have to enable my screen sharing, or somebody is. Joe, I don't know.
Let's see how we can do this. I think what we do is make you a can you do that, Ben? Make Tina a co-host. Is that possible?
It's just lovely to be with you. Thank you very much for asking me to take part. Let's try again. I'm sure it's going to work. Oh, it still says it's disabled.
Give me 1 second. Let me try to fix this quickly. Or
Okay.
ask my other colleague to fix this. Just give me a second.
Yeah, you've
If you
got
could
technical
carry on your
support.
Yes. If you could carry on the conversation first, because your time is precious. Let me try to get our colleagues to fix this.
yeah, I will refer to the books and how they came about in the talk, as well as other things. And what I'm thinking is, it's time my husband and I came back to Australia. He has family in Adelaide in South Australia, so we went to visit them several years ago, and then concluded in our visit in Sydney, having stopped off at Canberra on the way. So I'm feeling the call, seeing you all here, wonderful. And I'm very interested in dance. So one of the things that we did was to go to one of the cultural centres and see some of the indigenous dance and art. Now, shall I try again? See, no, we can have the talk without the pickies. It would be nice to have them if we can.
I'm wondering, Christina, if given that we've
It should be enabled now.
Really? There we go. Ah, that's it. Brilliant. Thank you.
There we go. Yeah.
Share that. And then I need to open that and play from start. There we go. Wonderful. Thank you. So I often wonder who's missing. And I think this is because my friend Cameron Partridge was co-editor of Michael Dillon's autobiography, which came out very recently, but had been lingering in a safe for decades. Are there stories of trans people of faith from the past that we just don't know about? For example, in April 2015, Canon Chris Newlands, then Vicar of Lancaster in the northwest of England, initiated what would become the Blackburn Motion in the Church of England for the welcome and affirmation of trans people. And when this went to the Deanery Synod in Lancaster, a woman spoke very movingly about her father, a priest who had transitioned several years ago and had to cease practicing as a priest. And when Chris told me this story, it was completely new to me. I'd never heard about this person. And I've tried to find out more, sadly without success. And presumably there are many other Christians, lay and ordained, in earlier generations we've not heard about. I don't even have a precise date for that episode. I'm assuming it is well before the Church of England's 1993 decision that women could be ordained as priests. Somebody transitioning to female in that era wouldn't be able to continue. And that was due to the 1970-71 Corbett versus Corbett ruling, which was that April Ashley, although she had socially transitioned, remained a male for legal purposes. Now, that dilemma can be seen from another opposite angle, if you like, in the case of trans man Mark Rees, who had a calling to priestly ordination, but it couldn't be tested due to that ruling because he still was legally female and priests at that time were male. Michael Dillon's autobiography reveals that prior to that 1970 ruling, the gender marker on trans people's birth certificates was changed on transition, but it would take over 3 decades before UK trans people came out of that legal limbo with the passing of the Gender Recognition Act in 2004. Well, to celebrate the passing of that significant legislation, Mark organised a service in St Anne's, Soho. It's a wonderfully inclusive church in London's gay village, like Pitt Street in Sydney. And it was fitting that he should be the person to pull this occasion together. Unable to test his priestly vocation, he bravely petitioned the European Court of Human Rights for trans people's right to marriage and family life and to privacy, which of course was denied to him then because of all the attendant media intrusion. His was the first of several unsuccessful but strategically important attempts to gain equality for UK trans people. And Mark also convened what would become Press for Change, and that's the UK lobbying group for trans equality that would eventually assist the UK government in drafting and implementing the gender recognition legislation in 2004. So here was a person of faith in the bleakest of times for UK trans people, putting themselves in the public square and under media scrutiny to make life better for their trans siblings. Thank you, Mark. And assisting Mark was another person of faith, a leading human rights lawyer, David Burgess, but known to me as Sonia in the first decade of this century, now no longer with us, and she was a member of Sybil's. And again, I think Sonia helps with a timeline, because like many professionals, thanks to that Corbett versus Corbett ruling, she presumably had reservations about transitioning before the early 21st century in a historically masculine profession like the law. And Jay Walmsley, on the right here, who founded the Sybil's, Christian Spirituality for Trans People in 1996, has told me that she postponed her transition until her retirement in 2000 because of the likely hostile reaction within the macho world of accountancy, which had been her career. So 2000, she waited until. And the year 2000 was hugely symbolic for many people, and certainly it was for me, because I knew that I didn't want to enter the new millennium without having taken a step, however small, towards transition. And in November 1999, so cutting it fine to say the least, I went to see Dr. Russell Reed, who I knew before, and here he is surrounded by some of his former clients, because like many people in the care of gender diverse people, he got pushback and from colleagues, professional jealousy and so on. And this is the case where before the General Medical Council. But I knew that he would prescribe cross-gender hormones as his diagnostic. So at least I was on the way. But I anticipated difficulties ahead transitioning as a Church of England priest. 2 years earlier, in 1997, Church of England priest Georgina Everingham, Gina, had transitioned, but as per the timeline, on her retirement, she went on to have, by the way, a very happy post-retirement ministry. It was rocky to begin with, but it's been fine. And as you can see, she wrote this, she comes from a more evangelical background and wrote this little booklet, Gender Reassignment and the Bible. But transitioning on retirement was what you did, really, because in the 70s, 80s and 90s, you could lose your job in the UK for transitioning. There was no legal protection for trans people at work. That came in 1999 when the Sex Discrimination Act was amended to include those intending to, undergoing, or having undergone gender reassignment. That was the word, and that's still used in the legal documentation here. 1999, the year I started hormones, but I didn't know about this legislation. And in any case, I'd already reached the conclusion that transition might be easier if I were in sector ministry. And that fell into place in 2000 when I became a healthcare chaplain. And the post was part-time. I thought that would give me some space to go about transition. And Rob and I could live in our own home, and that gave me greater privacy than living in a vicarage. As I say, I didn't know about this legislation, but in any case, the Church of England then and now was exempt from a lot of UK equality law. So that was only going to be of limited help. And I'd heard in confidence that another Church of England priest was transitioning, but I only discovered who it was, of course, when it was announced on the BBC television news. And not only was it someone I knew, but someone who I'd been at theological college with, the late Reverend Carol Stone. Now, Jo has told me, and she might want to comment on this later, the impact of reading the news about Carol in the Church Times. In contrast to the tiny paragraph about Gina moving quietly into retirement, here was a parish priest about to transition with the support of her parishioners and, significantly, her bishop, who went on record to say that he could see no ethical or ecclesiastical legal reasons to prevent Carol continuing in ministry. Well, that bishop was Bishop Barry Rogerson, now retired, then Bishop of Bristol. From his student days, he had supported women's ordination to the priesthood. He'd been a consultant to the movement for the ordination of women, and appropriately, and this is the occasion, he was the bishop who ordained the first cohort of female priests in the Church of England in March 1994. So with these staunchly feminist credentials, Carol's transition 6 years later didn't faze him in the least. My experience in another diocese was less positive. During the campaigning years for women's ordination, I'd been a member of Priests for the Ordination of Women. I'd overseen the training of several women as the Church of England opened up first the diaconate and then the priesthood to women. But in the diocese I'd moved to as a healthcare chaplain, Chichester, the bishops were against women's ordination. So as a trans woman, life was not going to be easy, and maybe I should have seen that coming. But what I couldn't foresee was that the new CEO at the hospital, who came in a few months after I arrived, also ran a large house church. And when he learned about me and my proposal to transition at work, he believed that the Lord had called him to that post, amongst other things, to prevent me transitioning. So that I was between a rock and a hard place is an understatement. Now, there are 2 points I want to note here. First, the impact of feminism in preparing the ground for trans people of faith. Obviously, until women could be ordained, and as you've heard, that's relatively recent in the Church of England, trans women clergy weren't really a possibility. But the theological work that paved the way for women's ordination would also benefit gender diverse people. For example, and it's something I came across in my own research and even wrote about in the late 70s, that in referring to Christ, the Bible and the Church Fathers refer to Christ's humanity, not his maleness. On the other hand, as you're well aware, there's also a vehemently anti-trans stand within feminism. Janice Raymond on the left, the transsexual empire of 1979 being a classic example, supervised by feminist theologian Mary Daly on the right, famous for the phrase, if God is male, then the male is God. Both Catholics, and Raymond had been a religious sister. And the alliance of radical feminism and religious conservatism is manifesting again now in our time, though remarkably and thankfully in our day, Catholic religious sisters are among the most vocal advocates for trans people. The second point, in addition to feminism, is the role of conservative religious rhetoric against trans people. When I met with my bishop in 2001, I urged him to speak with my clinician, with Russell. He never did that. He did, though, read some conservative Roman Catholic papers supplied to him by the author of the Church of England's House of Bishops document, Some Issues in Human Sexuality. These papers were never published, they were never peer-reviewed. Some Issues was largely written by the hugely conservative Dr. Martin Davey, then theological consultant to the House of Bishops. Now, this is being recorded, so I'm not going to point out the resemblance between him and anybody else. I have to say, Martin is the most charming person you could meet. He is the kindest person, but he just doesn't understand us at all. And the text, the chapter in that book, chapter 7, is heavily influenced by a document called Transsexuality, published in 2000 by the UK Evangelical Alliance, and Oliver O'Donovan's 1986, I think, tract, Transsexualism and Christian Marriage. Now, both ruled out gender transition on a priori, on biblical grounds. Male and female, he created them. Physiologically, human beings, it's claimed, are naturally dimorphic, and that's the same argument we hear today. There are only two sexes, male and female, and it's impossible to change sex. So, returning to the timeline then, and that document, Transsexuality, you see, 2000, this was still a tough climate for UK trans people, including trans people of faith. So several members of the Sibyls, Christian Spirituality for Trans People, had been rejected by their churches. They could only receive communion at Sibyls meetings, which is why we always had the Eucharist. Things would improve gradually, and the Gender Recognition Act 2004 contributed hugely to a more accepting social climate, and that included churches. But in 2000, the Sibyls were upset and angry at the way the church was discussing our lives without reference to our experience. Theological statements were being bandied about, but our voices weren't included. And that frustration led to the proposal that there should be a Sibyl's book. And that became, eventually, This Is My Body, Hearing the Theology of Trans Christians. Well, as you can see, it wasn't published till May 2016. Some of the contents was collated very early on, but the first co-editors, Michel Lemorvan was elderly and died, and the other editor had left parish ministry. She thought briefly to transition, wasn't really allowed back. So at this point, she hands it over to Michelle and I. Thankfully, Helen is back in parish ministry now, but was out for a decade. Not everybody has this easy. In the meantime, I published a critique of that Some Issues chapter that went in the journal Theology and is republished in this book. And I also published, as Joe mentioned, Unutterable Love, The Passionate Life and Preaching of F.W. Robertson. So it's about a Victorian romantic preacher who was obsessed about gender as I am, or then again, is it just the case that biographers impose their own lens on their subjects? Discuss. 2016 was just 2 years after the well-known 2014 Time magazine cover of Laverne Cox next to the headline, The Transgender Tipping Point. So 10 years after the UK gender recognition legislation. And these few short years were a high point, I think, for UK trans people. But you see, frontiers are dangerous places. Shots had always been fired at us, as we've seen, even in peaceful times. But the barrage became heavier in the UK from 2018, when the UK government began a consultation about reforming the Gender Recognition Act, which had got outdated. Progressive jurisdictions had demedicalized the process. They'd introduced self-identification. The UK government consulted and then did nothing, while gender-critical objections to reform grew louder. And at this point, we published Transfaith, a transgender pastoral resource, which foregrounds the voices of 12 trans Christians Chris Dowd had interviewed. Here he is with his very seasonal message during his doctoral research. And our co-author, Justin Tanis, author of the influential Transgendered, described life for trans people in the US at that point, noting the greater visibility and acceptance, true too in the UK, but also the growing backlash and discrimination, notably the notorious series of so-called bathroom bills. Well, the States is a huge influence on the UK. And so trans-affirming churches, which Chris and I published in 2020, included my chapter on the culture wars and the Christian community. That's how we were talking already. And I found meaning, theological meaning, in a very positive experience following a controversy over trans women swimming in the women-only pool on Hampstead Heath in London. And but the moral climate here was changing dramatically. A Google search of the UK media between August 2018 and August 2019 revealed a staggering 878 articles about trans people in 365 days. Not all were negative, many were. In 2023, ILGA, the index, the annual rainbow map of 49 countries across Europe, showed that the UK, which had led that table in 2015, was now in 17th place. And this is because many senior members of our government and major media outlets are in thrall to gender-critical views. The progressive tide has truly turned in the UK at that level, not, I think, on the ground. Fortunately, our Christian faith is the most wonderful resource to counter hate and hostility. And it was fortuitous that the Blackburn motion for the welcome and affirmation of trans people was debated by the Church of England's General Synod in 2017. So a year before all this pushback really got going. It had huge majorities in the houses of bishops, clergy, and laity. The bishops weren't keen on producing a specific liturgy to mark transition, and partly because that's complicated procedurally, as we're seeing at the moment with the difficulties over the prayers of love and faith for same-sex couples. But the guidance was, there's Chris, by the way, Chris Newlands, who proposed the motion. He took it right from his parish right through to General Synod. The pastoral guidance, which trans people helped to craft, I had a hand in it with others, is unequivocal. Here it is. The Church of England welcomes and encourages the unconditional affirmation of trans people equally with all people within the Church, the body of Christ, and rejoices in the diversity of that one body into which all Christians have been baptized by one Spirit. Conservatives disliked that intensely and protested, but this is the official position. Well, I need to end so that other people can speak, but I do want to mention URC Minister, the Reverend Dr. Alex Clare Young, above his book, Transgender, Christian and Human, to thank them for stepping in as a member of the Church of England's Living in Love and Faith coordinating group and ensuring a trans voice was there when I'd had enough of it, as well as for their research, writing, and commitment to trans people articulating their theology. In this, they've greatly influenced Chrissy Sheverset, trans outreach worker at St. Columba's Church in Oxford. Chrissy has organised 2 trans, non-binary and intersex theology conferences, the first in 2022 in the church where she's based in Oxford, and the second was this year, just a few weeks ago, in north of England in York. And I've sent Joe the links for the 2 days of the conference to circulate. They showcase the energy, creativity and love we desperately need in order to survive and overcome the current backlash against us. The energy, creativity and love that you have in this group, and which I'm already benefiting from this evening.
Thank you.
Oh, stop
Thank
sharing.
Thank you so much, Tina. That's absolutely wonderful. Setting that story, both your personal one, but the shifts that have taken place, but also encouraging us there to see, where there are partners across the world and the strength of faith to help transform things. Some of you be aware it's disappearing, isn't it, on the thing? Just recently, there was a history of trans people in Australia published by the Melbourne-based ACU historian Noah Reisman, and that's worth looking as well as complementing that. And in our own history, one of the things that there's a lot of that hiddenness that you talked about, I think. Fortunately, there are some people who aren't too hidden, like Norrie, who's a member of South Sydney Uniting Church, who helped to create the break the binary by getting the law changed to allow non-binary people, genderqueer people, to be able to express themselves as well, and still a member of, very much a member of South Sydney Uniting Church and others as well. But we're only gradually discovering these people as they're coming forward. So what you're doing, I think, will be an encouragement to some of us to pursue that further. But enough of me. I want to ask 4 people who are part of our panel to make a response and maybe to add something to from your own particular perspective. And the first person I'd like to ask is Imania Brown, who's actually joining us from Tahiti. You might explain a little bit about that, Imania, if you can. I know your internet connection isn't great, but Imania is just such a terrific strength to us here in Australia, a Samoan Fa'afafine, LGBTIQA rights activist of huge magnitude, and currently working for Equality Australia, one of our prime LGBTIQA national advocacy organisations, and joining us from a conference which is taking forward queer interests across the world, not least in the Pacific and Asia. Imani, can you join us? What would you like to add from the perspective that you come from to what are there things that Tina has touched on that you could add to?
So first of all, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I'm so sorry I cannot turn on my video because my laptop's at 15% and I'm trying to charge it while I'm listening. Look, I'm in Tahiti for the LGBTI roundtable organized by Cousin du Cousin, which is a Tahitian LGBTI organization. First time ever in the Pacific that they have leaders of government attend an LGBTI meeting. The Vice President of Tahiti hosted, and the LGBTI ambassadors for Australia, New Zealand, and France were here. So it was a great opportunity for the indigenous Mahu and area communities of Tahiti to be in the room with people that actually make decisions that directly affect them. So it was a great meeting, and unfortunately it's nearly midnight here. So I'm like, and when Joe said, "Oh yeah, it's 8 p.m," I'm like, "Yeah, 8 p.m. Sydney, it's fine, not a problem." And then they said, "Oh yeah, you have to go to Tahiti." I'm like, yeah. Anyway, thank you very much to Tina for that amazing introduction. The things that I wanted to, there's 4 things I wanted to quickly add to that from the passage, right? The passage to me, like the words to me, deal with 4 main particular areas in my life. The first one is the embracing of individual struggles, right? The passage talks about how we embrace our individual struggles. It acknowledges that even in moments of darkness or struggle, that there is an understanding and an acceptance of individual experiences. And that is so important from the trans perspective, right? That there is an understanding and an acceptance of our individual experiences. And that for me is the validation of my transness. Like, I don't care what anybody says. I am embracing the individual struggles that I have through life as a trans Fa'afafine woman living in Australia. And I acknowledge that even in moments of darkness or struggle, I understand the place of that darkness and struggle, and that I accept that as part of my individual experience as a trans woman. The second thing I wanted to add regarding the passage is that there is a validation in those challenges. We all go through the challenges, whether we're trans men, trans women, gender non-binary, gender diverse. We all go through challenges, whether it's acceptance, whether it's erasure, whether it's violence and discrimination. It's a challenge. But I hear the passage. When I hear that passage, I think that this in particular highlights the idea that challenging times as trans individuals ourselves are recognized by the book as valid and valuable in each of our unique trans journeys. And that is so important to me because, quite often, a lot of our brothers and sisters can't make it. They're not here. They've gone because of the violence and the discrimination from people around the world. And it's so important to validate that, the idea that challenging times, are recognized as valid and valuable. Your journey is valid and valuable. So is mine. So is every other trans sibling that we have. And that's really important. Third thing is the inclusive divine creation factor around the passage, right? The passage affirms the belief that there is a divine and intentional creation, right? And it's inclusive of diverse ways that we all are formed, right? And that to me is again a validation, right? It is the authority that I trust and believe that I am a divine and intentional creation. I didn't create myself. I was made this way. I just had to push myself out of my own body and my own spirit to be able to recognize the intentional and divine creation that I am. And that's something that we must always remember as trans individuals. And my final thought, right, that intentional creation, the divine and intentional creation, it's predestined. It is predestined, and we should celebrate that diverse identities that we have as a trans community, that celebration of diversity of creation, right? The promotion of the positive view of our self-identity. Look at that with self-identity. We self-identify. It's already in the Bible. And emphasizing that we are beautiful and we are wonderful in all our individual selves. And that's how that passage speaks to me. And, that's how Tina, and Tina's amazing words have actually reached to me and kind of have confirmed that for me. So I just wanted to share that with everybody because, I don't care what anybody says and they try and put me down. I'm in the Bible. I am in the Bible, There is a reason why I exist. I'm a divine and intentional creation, and nobody's going to stop me from being divine and intentional in the work that I do to help everybody else. So anyway, I just wanted to end on that. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I'm sorry I can't turn my camera on.
It's just a blessing, Imani, that you're with us to all that. Thank you so much and for all that you've contributed there. I'm going to go to Steph Fenton next, who's another remarkable person in Australia, and a younger queer gender pastor, writer, and educator here in Sydney. And Steph, I wondered what you would like to say in response.
I love that Gabby's been pinned. Like, here is Steph, and then there's Gabby. Yeah, I didn't prepare anything as formal as Imania. Beautiful words, but just love hearing Tina, your kind of just your walk through the history because yeah, I think sometimes these things can feel new and old, and I've seen some of those waves of kind of acceptance of trans and gender diverse people in my own experience in my own church, and then to kind of go the complete opposite way and to just watch those waves of how things have happened through history and to hear that to hear that kind of storyline was really wonderful, and from a UK perspective as well. So thank you for overviewing that. I learned a lot. Yeah, and I think as someone who is currently trying to write some trans theology and kind of I guess go in that tradition of trans people using our voice to speak from our faith about how beautiful and wonderful we are, and how we have this special divine thing about us that we are just trying to reflect back to the world. It was nice to kind of sit and see others who have done those things before me and kind of join in that beautiful history of people who are, who have done that. So and I've just been in this zone of writing about gender expansiveness as revealing the divine, and I think the way that gender expansiveness heals the world from gender binary violence, and a lot of us will have experiences in different ways of what gender binary violence is. that like inequality, you know, human rights across the world, the gender binary has really oppressed and hurt and harmed so many. And then us beautiful, gender expansive people come along and bring some liberation and healing, and that's frightening. And that's really wonderfully queer. And that's the tradition into which like we embrace our divinity and kind of go forth with the power of the divine who is in us to shatter and break down and bend and blur, and heal and free, and share love. Yeah, so I guess that's my shambles of reflections in response to that. But again, just echoing your appreciation for being in a room of people who are gathering to do that together is a real encouragement.
Thank you so much, Steph. And I know Gabby was highlighted there, but I'm going to leave Gabby last, not because Gabby's least at all, but because Gabby will discover while I'm on it. So I'm going to ask Selina if Selina might make a response. Selina is an Anglican trans woman and rector of Ipswich in Queensland, and as you can tell, she's another POM as well.
My voice really give it away quite so easily. Yes, I'm not from quite as far north as you. I'm from the good county of Yorkshire. Tina, I just want to say thank you for what you've said tonight. I actually only came out to Australia just 7 years ago, so I actually witnessed a lot of this happening, but I was doing it from the very safe position of I wasn't going to transition at all. That was never my intention. I remember, the various things that you mentioned there. I particularly remember Chris Newland's with his motion to just not only his parish, but also to deanery and whatever, because I actually worked with Chris in 2011, which is just a few years beforehand. And I think the thing that struck me at the time was that Blackburn Diocese is the twin sister of Chichester Diocese. And if there were triplets, there'd be Sydney Diocese in there as well. And he was able to actually take this and fight for it and do so much with it against a huge opposition that was actually there present at the time. What, to my mind, in Australia, I think we are somewhat behind where we are in the United Kingdom, in the same way the United Kingdom is behind where America is at the moment. But you can see how progress is being made in all those countries. And I think we can take example from yourselves in England and also from the Americans that we will eventually overcome things. While I was scribbling notes, I was just reminded of a quote from one of my favorite authors, Neil Gaiman, who once said, "Fairy tales teach us not that dragons exist, but that dragons can be defeated." And I think with the concerted effort that we have here and in the wider church as well, I think the dragon that is anti-trans rhetoric can actually be overcome. So thank you once again. You've inspired a number of people here today. I suggest you've certainly inspired me, and I do thank you for that, Tina.
Thank you, Selina. And last but not least, as I say, I'm going to ask Gabby. And Gabby is a member of the Presbytery in Sydney, but amongst other things, and as a writer, non-binary poet and composer, works with Mikali, we heard from earlier, and also Uniting Church advocate. And it's Gabby knows that we're trying to get a resolution up to the National Assembly, amongst other things. But Gabby, you did a wonderful job recently in our presbytery of drawing together groups from different congregations and helping to equip them. And it's trying to mainstream that sort of thing. I think that we've been doing, and I'd like to thank you for that work. And as Tina was saying about at the end there, talking about some of the trans leaders in the UK, I think it's making those links and drawing on one another that hopefully will help us go forward. But I just think you're an amazing person, and I'd be interested in your response as someone who's carrying on the timeline, and hopefully will be able to take us forward into the future.
Thank you've given me more titles than I knew I had. Yeah, it's really lovely to be in this space. Sorry, I think we're about to all hear a plane go over my house. I apologize. I'm in the inner west. It's so like it's such an honor, Tina, to hear from you and about that kind of legacy that, to be honest, extends to before I was born. And as someone who is part of a church congregation where there's a lot of like young queer and trans people who are like figuring ourselves out in community, which is really lovely, the thing that we lack is like queer elders and like trans elders and like being able to see the history. And so I think sometimes for people around my age there's kind of this deep down fear about like, do we only know who we are because of the internet? Like, are we a new thing? And so it's really lovely to be reminded that there is this legacy that we're part of. We're not like just pioneering stuff now. We're like part of a tradition of trans and queer people of faith. And that's really lovely to hear about that and to hear about the ways that it's connected to the networks here in Australia as well. And I really want to read more about stuff specific to here. But yeah, been doing little bits and pieces in our presbytery here and there, like rewriting liturgies to be more gender neutral, like organising some transgender diversity awareness training a couple months ago, which Steph delivered for us, which was excellent. Yeah.
Thanks, Gabby. Thanks very much. Ben, I think you've been monitoring possibly some questions. Do we have some questions or remarks at the moment coming through? If anyone's got any questions, particularly for Tina, we have a few minutes to be able to discuss those.
Well, we have a remark for Tina, from someone who's here. Tina, when you come to Australia, can you come to Melbourne, please? We are hoping to have various interfaith speakers come to the trans events in 2024. So that's one of the remarks, but I suppose you might be in demand around. So
I'd love to. I haven't been to Melbourne. It's the favorite. It's the favorite city of one of Rob's cousins. They often go.
Wonderful. I'm also mindful of time, Joe.
Yeah.
We are hitting 9:10. I'll hand it back to you, actually.
No, I was just saying, if it comes, there's a couple. What I'd like to ask Tina, and in terms of looking forward, where do you think what are the things that excite you about moving forward, and where should we be putting our energy, and maybe making links like we have with you or we're trying to do ourselves? I suppose that's three questions, isn't it? Well, what's most what's exciting at the moment, and what's the next steps for us to get together, both in our own backyard and together?
Yeah, I guess because here we are, connected, and there was the conference in York. I double booked. I'll be honest, I double booked, so I couldn't go to York. I'm like Selena. I'm also from Yorkshire. I love going north. But I presented and attended online. So if the timings worked, it would be great to be able to be part of next year's Trans, Non-Binary and Intersex conference. And likewise, if there are things in Australia that we could, it's just a matter of communicating it. I was energized by that conference. The first day included two poets, the poet playwright Joe Clifford and Jay Hume. And so it had a very, and they're both consummate communicators. And Joe Clifford, I've not really related to the play she wrote about Queen Jesus, but the way she just told some of the Bible stories was extraordinary. And then there are a lot of young people coming along. doing the work. One of the interesting things in the research Chris Dowd and others and I've been doing with others has been from younger queer people say, and this is something I'll just to leave with you really, that they haven't felt the need necessarily to carve out a creative theology. That maybe for the pioneers that was necessary to find your place, make your case, but there's a little bit of conservatism around younger queer people, which is interesting and not necessarily a bad thing.
It sounds like second generation women who've been ordained. You know, there was a bit. You know, they didn't move that agenda forward a little bit. I think that can happen, can't it? Because you're too busy doing whatever you're doing now. The job's opened up.
Yeah. I mean, on Monday, I'm going to be chaplain at one of the additional inclusive chaplains at General Synod. But Monday evening, there's Trans in the City. I went last year, which is this huge event. Bobby Pickard, she has made her way into all the big corporate organizations to bring about trans awareness. And so again, it's this workplace thing, isn't it? Changing workplace cultures. And there are awards to particular individuals. So Ash Hayhurst, who I'm working with on the Being Ready project, I'm just doing a bit of editing, but which is to do training for anybody involved in end-of-life care, death, dying for gender diverse people, because there can be problems at the end of life, clashes with families, and so on. And so making the professionals aware. So it will be to set up a so he's up for an award, and he will deserve it. So there's lots of great things going on. What about Pope Francis?
Yes.
The statement yesterday in response to the dubia. I tell you, the Catholic Church I just love it. And picking up the point that all those Catholic nuns who've come out with statements affirming trans people, the sacredness of our journey. One particular sister, this came up from Steph, and our individuality, the theology expressed by Father Daniel Horan in the States, using Duns Scotus, the thisness of each person, that also excites me a lot, and has been part of my connection really with what's being said here by others tonight.
Thank you. I hope we will stay in contact and we can build this up. Thank you to everyone. We don't want to prolong with the seasonal congregation. We want to keep them clear. We'll have others in the new year. We want to do something around issues of race and queerness. We think that's absolutely crucial, particularly Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander intersectionality, but we're also keen to look at the broader issues of race. We think they're ones that the Christian community needs to reflect on and can contribute to in what is part of the interface. But we're open to other thoughts. So if you've got ideas and you'd like to do that, please let us know of ideas for that. I'm going to just give Ben 1 minute to do a plug for our AGM.
Yes, so AGM's coming up in 2 Tuesdays' time. But also more than that, as what Joe have said, please contribute. Please share your sacred journey. Continue to tell your stories. That is where the sacredness is shared. And I think that's what it's about. We are looking for people to be part of our editorials, in our newsletter. Please join in the conversation. Email Joe or myself in Eco Voices. We are a movement. We're not necessarily a traditional organizations because we run multiple organizations, but we are a movement together for a truly flourishing church that it's for all of us. So I think with the high note that Tina ended on earlier, I thought, Tina, would you offer us a blessing as we enter into Trans Week of Awareness, as well as Trans Day of Remembrance on the 20th of November. I thought that it would be appropriate to have you to give us a blessing. Would
Very
you?
lovely. Thank you, Ben. Thank you. And Imania's words really resonated with the prayer that I pulled out, which comes from the time of struggles over sexuality. So it's Jim Cotter's Prayer at Night, a book for the darkness, because it's night for you now. And I'm just adapting it slightly. As I say, it came out of the sexuality struggles. God accepts you as you are. God has created you a sexual being. God has created you a gendered being. God is at the heart of your striving, still creating you, now as lover in the image of divine love. Always pursuing, luring, drawing, never letting go. Whatever your unique mix and measure of sexuality and gender, be very glad. To be a human, sexual, gendered person is fundamental and ordinary and exceptional. And because we are loved unconditionally, we don't have to take ourselves too seriously. If I were the finger of God and all the world were ticklish. Again, Jim's words, not mine. It's the blessing for Thursday evening. The blessing of God, life giver, pain bearer, love maker, be with us now and always. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Tina. And thank you, everyone, for joining us and for making this evening such a sacred one, for your holiness, for your integrity of being who you are, bearing witness to the gospel, leading and bearing the gospel. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. God bless.
Good night.
Night.